Okay, so good morning, ושבוע טוב, and I'm very happy, very happy both to see those of you who are here and those of you who are on Zoom. So I'll just let you know, for those who are in Zoom, that we have 100 people here in the hall. And you are also welcome to join, very safe and very nice. Our topic for today, just a second, let's share the screen. So our topic for today is old age through Jewish eyes, or old age in Hashkafah and Halacha. And that's obviously a very large topic, and we are only going to scratch the surface of it. But nonetheless, I think it's important it's a topic that is important to speak about, as it may be that our Hashkafah on old age is very different than the way things are being usually taken in the culture around us. So it is important to emphasize and re-emphasize the way that we see it. My father, Zichrono Livracha, told us many times that he was once in a lecture that made a great impression on him. So it was a lecture by a certain professor who was an expert to medical systems, to health system, to public health systems. As a matter of fact, this professor passed away about a few months ago. It was a few years, 2 or 3 years younger of my own father. So he was back in the 60s or the 70s. He heard him speaking. And this professor said that if you take into account the price that we pay, the cost, if you do a cost-benefit analysis of treating people above the age of, I can't remember right now what was the age, of 65 or 70. So if you take this type of analysis, then you will see that it is more benefiting society, maybe to reduce treatment of people over a certain age. And it was not necessarily extremely get rid of them, but my father always said it sounded not very far away from that. And my father was shocked that someone can stand in a university and speak in that way. And he was a well-known expert. By the way, a universal. I mean, he was all working also for other countries. And so that's an interesting, I think, remark, observation about. Now, again, that's not something that you would say that's because of the internet. So we speak about 40, 50 years ago, but nonetheless, it seems that Western culture, Western world has a very different way of looking about old age, right? So we hear from many people that the world belongs to the youth, right, to the young. And that is not necessarily, that is not the way that we see it. So again, I think it's an important subject. It's an important subject. Now, our topic in this winter is health and halacha, health and Torah. And as I said, because now old age in itself is not a disease, right? So it's not something that in itself is a health crisis. But many questions, many moral, ethical, or halachic questions about how to develop a health system is a question. What is now? That is maybe that would sound almost insulting, but that's the way that some discussions are being asked. What is the value that you give to life in old age? That is not only a question. The question that we would speak about in Mirza Hashem next week which would be many very important questions about quality of life against longevity. And to what extent do you treat people when you know that their quality of life is going to suffer greatly if and when their life would become longer? So that's one type of question. But there are many questions. For example, to what extent do you invest in building hospitals that are geared towards younger audiences, or hospitals that are geared towards older patients? Or to what extent do you make research in medication that is for Alzheimer or for other diseases? And it's very easy to see, and there are many studies that have shown, that demonstrated, that there is a unproportional investment in people of younger ages than in people of older ages. And that is an ethical question. That is a moral, that is an halachic question. To what are we obligated to take care first? Now, these are not necessarily questions. Okay, I don't want to speak about moral corruption. I think that's too strong of a word, but these are real questions. So if you are a head of a state or a head of a medical institution, and you can either invest money, let's say, in fertilization research, that's also a moral, obviously a moral objective, or in treating people in their old age. Where are you to invest your money? This is a real question which is being asked. This is a real question which is being asked. In the end, someone needs to give the answer. So these are questions that are being asked, very interesting questions. We are not going, we would not be able to go into these type of resolutions here. But at least to have a general overview about the view of halacha, of Yahadut, again, from the bird's eye about old age. Now, we would begin with the very simple pasuk from Aseret HaDibrot. Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha, so you should respect your father and your mother. Leman ya'arichun yamecha, so your days would be longer. Al ha'adama asher Hashem Elokecha noten lach, on the earth which your Lord gives you. Now, if we would think about that for a minute, I think it's very simple to understand that while your father and your mother are specific persons, HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not speak only to individual, he speaks also to the nation as a nation. We as a nation are commanded to respect, to pay tribute to our fathers and mothers, that is to the older generation. Now, this is something that is not unique to Yahadut. Every human being can understand that. Chazal are very fond of saying that Esav can serve as a model of respecting his father, right? Which is a very interesting observation. Also, not only Esav, when Chazal wants in Masechet Kiddushin, they want to give an example to what extent one should respect his father and mother. So the example being given is from a certain goy, a Gentile, named Dama ben Netina. Maybe some of you have heard the story. So he had a red heifer among his cows, and the sages wanted to buy, and he had also a nice jewel, Even Tova, a nice diamond that could be used for the choshen, and he didn't want to sell because the key to the closet where this good gem was, so the key was under the pillow of his father, and his father was asleep. So he was willing to give up a very large amount of money in order not to wake up his father. I'm trying to teach that to my children with no avail. I even allow, if for a great sum of money you can wake me up, that doesn't help. So they give that as an example. They give that as an example for to what extent one should be willing to give up in order to respect his father and mother. Now, that's again an example given from the Gentiles. So clearly, That is a general, a universal notion that we should respect our elders. And the reason given in the Torah, I may say, is also universal. Leman yarichun yamecha. We all understand that the way, I mean, that's a very egoistic thing to say, but in the end it is clear that the way that we would treat our elders is the way in which we will be treated. Every one of us remember the way that we saw his parents treating the older generation. I mean, some of us were zoche to see our grandfathers and grandmothers, some of us were not. But even without grandfathers and grandmothers, there is an older generation, and you can see how they are being treated. And we, as human beings, we tend to mimic what we saw. And we also know that our youth would mimic what we will demonstrate. So that's I think is very clear. And this, again, without thinking about anything too spiritual, even that should be enough for us to understand that we should at the very least try to help our elders in order for us to be helped when time would come. But this view, as logical that it is, and as I think that that's a very common notion among the human race, we may even say, that portrays elders and old age as basically as people that are in need for help. That is basically the view. So they are in need of help, they are fragile, they are vulnerable, and we want to help them as we want to help all other people. If we are any moral human beings, then we want to help all people that are in vulnerable situation. So that may be children, and that may be people that are sick, and that may be the impaired, and that may be the old. Now, this is obviously a very real notion. Many people in old age. Now, I don't give definitions right now to old age, as you can see, because that's a moving target. There is a big difference between who was seen as old 50 years ago and who is seen as old nowadays. As they say, 80 is the new 50. Yeah, exactly. So, but by the way, also halacha recognizes that at least to some functions, not to all of them, but to some function, the definition of old of Zacchaeum is relative. It depends on society. So just one simple example, Shmuel HaNavi, who died at the age of 52, when he spoke to the people and said, I cannot continue to lead you, he said, I am old. He was 52. 52 nowadays is extremely young, I guess. So that's, very young. No. Yeah, exactly. So that's, so obviously that's a relative thing. On the other hand, Avraham Avinu lived to 175. So it's really a question of standards of the generation. So I'm not speaking about numbers. I'm speaking about notions and concepts. So the concept that the old are in need of help, again, that's not something made up. That is clearly something you can acquire just from observation of the real world. And so, for example, in a very, I think, moving, we may almost say a piece of poetry in Sefer Kohelet, in the 12th chapter, and I translated that, I copied the translation of that, it's from the Chabad site. You can have, by the way, I think that's those who are looking for this very useful resource. So Chabad online has the all English translation of the Tanakh. They also have the all English translation of the Rambam. And a few others, I believe they also have the Tanya there. So that's so they have a few Sepharim there translated for free. So that's a resource that can be utilized. Anyhow, so I would read the Hebrew and just help myself with the English here. So Kohelet calls for us, Uzchor et borecha b'imei bechurotecha. So he is urging us to remember our Creator while we are still young. Before would come the days of bad, והגיעו שנים, and years would arrive, אשר תאמר אין לי בהם חפץ, that you would say, I do not desire them. So Kohelet knows that there may be years in which people, they do not desire to live through them. So that's not something which is, again, which is some corruptive, that is not, that is a part of real life, if you look them in the eye, and not just having idealized romantic ideas, then yes, sometimes people come to an old age in which they say, I do not desire them. And then he has, עד אשר לא תחשך השמש, before the sun, the light, and the moon will darken, and the clouds will return after the rain. So that's a very beautiful poem about the recession, you may say, of life. The way that vitality can be reduced. So he says the light, the sun, the dust can go down, and he speaks here about the thief that would fall down, וחשכו הרואות בערובות, and those who look out of the windows become dark, and he speaks obviously about the eyes, וסגרו דלתיים בשוק בשפל כל התחנה, so all the doors are being closed, everything ceases to function. גם מגבוה היראה, so people begins to be fearful of going into heights, וחתחתים בדרך, and he's beginning to fear to walk in the road because he may stumble and fall, and we know that falling down is one of the main problems that we have in old age. Not only the falling down, but obviously the impacts, right? What happens afterwards. And sometimes because people are fearful of falling, they remain at home, which obviously also is not good for them. So it's very difficult here. It's very difficult to struggle, to manage that. And he says, one shall rise at the voice of a bird. That's an interesting, so sleep become very difficult. Right? So he's waking up easily. And all the strongest shall be brought low. And he speaks about the desire will fail, for man goes to his everlasting home, and the mourners go about in the street. I skip to the last pasuk here. וישוב העפר על הארץ כשהיה, the dust returns to the earth as it was. So we are dust, we are made out of dust. So the dust would return to the earth, and the spirit would return to God who gave it. So that's a very heart-touching poem about the last years of human being. And again, that is not idealized here in any way. It doesn't, it could have been, it could be better. It could have painted a slightly more brighter picture of old age. He could have spoken about having your grandchildren and grandchildren around you, but he doesn't do that. Kohelet wants to be very realistic and give maybe a more gloomy view about life. That's what he's doing here. That's what he's doing here. That's why he says, you should worship God. We should remember what was the first pasuk. He says to us, we should service God while we are still able. Because in the last year, if one would say, I would wait for old age. Now I would enjoy, I would run after pleasures, and they would come in which I will return. So Shlomo says to him, Kohelet says to him, the day in which you would return may be too late, because you would not be able, you would return, everyone would return, dust would return to the earth, and the spirit would return to the God who gave it, but returning from our deeds is very difficult at that stage. So that's a very realistic view, which I think that is important that we would keep it in mind. A beautiful midrash that I couldn't skip. It doesn't give us a novel view more than what we saw in Kohelet, but it's so beautiful I just couldn't let up. So I would read it with you. That's a midrash from Tanchuma. And the midrash says that the life of a human being can be devised into 7 words. 7 words, it means here 7 existences, 7 modes. He says the first word, Olam Rishon, Domeh LaMelech. So the young baby is like a king. Everyone asks, how is he? Everyone wants to see him. They kiss him, they hug him, mipnei shehu ben shana, because he's 1 year old. He doesn't have to do anything, only to be 1 year old. Beautiful. And the second word, he says, that's a sharp language, but that's the way the Midrash says, Olam sheni domeh lechazir. So the small child is like a boar. So he is running around, rolling in the dirt, and that's terrible too, right? That's the age of 2 years old. Then he says the third word of the human being, that's like a calf, right? A small, a young cow. שהוא מרקד לכאן ולכאן. So it's dancing around and eating before his mother. So the baby is having pleasure before his father and mother and dance here and there, and he's playing and everyone is happy with him. Then is similar to a horse. So the young boy is already like a horse. So he is running. He is running every side. And then he comes to the age of 18. In the age of 18 is like the best horse. So we have a regular horse, and then we have a sus meshubach, an excellent horse. Then the fifth word is like a donkey. So after the age of 18, you come to the age of, 20, 35. So you are like a donkey. Why like you are a donkey? Because they put the ukaf. How do you say ukaf? Right? The back, a burden. Yeah, no, what they ride on. The saddle. Thank you, the saddle. So they put the saddle on you, and they put the wife, they put the children, and you carry them, and you go here and there, and try to bring food, and everything is shouting at you. So you're like a donkey. Okay. Then the sixth word, he says that's like a dog, because then after when he's 40 or 50, then he is no longer even, you cannot even shout at him, just do whatever he wants. So that's like a dog. And then he says the seventh word, it doesn't give you numbers. So I don't know, the last number he gives is 40 for a donkey. So I don't know when he's like a dog and when but now he begins the seventh word. So maybe that is 60, 65, 70, I don't know. He says that is like a monkey. דומה לקוף. Why? שנשתנה דמותו מכל הבריות. He looks different than all. He looks like a human being, but he's different. And he's asking about everything. So here, I think that the Midrash is trying to give us maybe the beginning of dementia. So he's asking about everything. So suddenly he's not sure about himself. אוכל ושותה כמו נער. He eats and drinks like a boy, and he plays like a baby, משחק כמו תינוק. וישוב לימי אלומיו בדת. He returns to his young age in his mind, אבל לא בדבר אחר, but not in anything else. So that's again, a very heart-touching, a very moving description, I think. ואפילו, but then it's very sharp, very, very sharp. ואפילו בניו ואנשי ביתו מלעיגינה. He says even his children or his household members, even they make fun of him, מלעיגין עליו. ומקללים אותו ושונאים אותו. So that's again, so again, the Midrash says, I am not right now speaking about the ideal. Obviously, the Midrash doesn't think that's how things are supposed to be. That's not how they should be. But that is how it can be. It can be like that. וכשהוא דובר שום דבר, אומרים לו, הניחו לו. So when he tries to say anything, they say, okay, thank you. Let him go. They say, הניחו לו. Don't even listen. כי הוא נער וזקן, because he's at the same time he's old, but he's also very young. But here it is not a compliment. It means here that in his mind he is young, but in his body he is old. והוא דומה לקוף בכל ענייניו, and again, he's like a man. So that's a very sad description of how old age can be. And the question is, what do we do after these depictions? Is that just a sad part of life? Now that is one view. That is a sad part of life. Obviously, all of people would want, let's say we can imagine such a concept, right? All people would want to stay at the age of 30, 40, but what can we do? What can we do? Life goes on, and you find yourself at, I don't know, 119. Let's say that let's speak only about the age of 119, right? And you find one would find himself in this situation, and let's have mercy on these people, because one day we would also be like them. So that is we may say the general notion of let's have mercy on the elders, because one day we would also stand in their place. But that's not where we stop. But Yahadut have a much more complicated view on this matter, as we can, I think, imagine and assume. And an interesting hint in this direction is in the Gemara in Baba Metzia Peizayin, source Dalet. I'm sorry, I didn't give you no, it's Baruch Hashem, now we have So Avraham Zaken Baba Yamim. So Avraham is old, and he is Baba Yamim. That's a term I would like to return to later. Baba Yamim is coming of days. Ve'Hashem berach et Avraham bakol. And God blessed Avraham with everything. And it's a very, for Chazal, it was very interesting to try to understand what is this everything that Avraham was blessed with. How can you be blessed with everything? What is this everything? Different suggestions. Some say that he was blessed with a daughter. Some say that he was blessed to not having a daughter. That is because very interesting, different ideas about what does it mean to be blessed with everything. And then, but the Gemara here has the following suggestion. Ad Avraham lo haya zikna. So till Avraham Avinu, there was not such a thing as being old. Now, obviously, people live to old age, but they were not old. Man de'avei bai lemishtai be'adei Avraham, mishtai be'adei Yitzchak, be'adei Yitzchak. So people, when they would want to speak with Yitzchak, they would, by mistake, they would speak with Avraham Avinu. They would want to speak with Avraham, they would speak with Yitzchak. So Avraham looked young as Yitzchak. Nowadays, people would pay fortune to look like their children. But Avraham thought that that is inappropriate. That is disgraceful. So, Ata Avraham ba'arachmei. Avraham asked for mercy. Ve'havei zikna. And then old age came to the world. Now, I'm not sure that we are supposed to take this midrash literally, meaning that before Avraham Avinu, there was no white hair, or before Avraham Avinu, there were no sicknesses of old age. Maybe, but I don't think that that's what this midrash is trying to paint. What this midrash is trying to paint is that Avraham Avinu had something new to say about being old. Not only the question of what is the color of your hair, but something about what is the quality of oldness. Can you say oldness, of being in old age? And to understand that, I would like us to continue to another source, and that is an interesting story in Shmuel. Now, just a little background. As we all know, David HaMelech, who had not a simple life, and he also suffered a rebellion from his own son, from Avshalom. And during this rebellion, he was forced to flee out of Yerushalayim. Not only out of Yerushalayim, he had to pass the Jordan to the eastern side of the Jordan in order to escape his son and his soldiers. Now, while he was in the eastern side of the Jordan, in the Gilad, so he was helped, he was maintained, he was financed by a man called Barzilai HaGilady. So HaGiladi that came from Gilad, and Barzilai was his name. Now, after David HaMelech secured his kingship and Avshalom was killed, then David HaMelech wanted to pay back to those who helped him, which is the moral thing to do, to be makir tov, right? To acknowledge, to be grateful. So he came to Barzilai and wanted, let's see, so say, Barzilai HaGiladi ירד מרוגלה. So Barzilai came towards him, ויעבור את המלך הירדן לשלחו את הירדן. He was walking with David HaMelech near the Jordan. וברזילי זקן מאוד, he was extremely old, בן 80 שנה, he was 80 years old. Now again, in the time of the Tanakh, being 80 years old, that was something. So let's remember that David HaMelech lived only to the age of 70. And Shmuel, as I said, lived to the age of 52. So that's the age spectrum that we speak about. So living to the age of 80 was zaken meod. And he financed, as we say, he maintained the king when the king was in Machanaim, that is in the Gilad, because he was a great man. And the king said to Barzilai, Ata avoriti, come with me to Yerushalayim, vechilkelti otcha imadi b'Yerushalayim. You fed me when I was in exile. Now I would like to pay back and feed you. So come and I would give you the best thing. That's the king's house. So you get the best food, everything. ויאמר ברזילי אל המלך, כמה ימי שני חיי, כי אעלה את המלך ירושלים. So how old do you think I am that I am going to take this journey with you to ירושלים? בן 80 שנה אנוכי היום. I am 80 years old. העדה בין טוב לרע? Can I differentiate between bad and good? No, it doesn't mean here necessarily in the moral sense. It means, אם יטעם עבדך את אשר, if I would taste something, you'd give it the best food. ואת אשר אשתה, do you think that I would enjoy it? That's a waste of money. That's a waste of money. That's like giving me a whiskey bottle of $100 a shot. And that's a way I cannot differentiate. So taking someone, he says, Barzilai says to the king at the age of 80, and giving him good food, delicious food, and good wine, and עם השמעות בכל שרים ושעות, you'd put singers and choirs, you'd pay a fortune for that. I have no enjoyment, I cannot hear, I cannot taste. Let me sit at my home. ולמה יהיה עבדך עוד למסע? So I'll just be a burden over you. יעבור עבדך את הירדן, ולמה יגמלני המלך? So I would accompany you, I would cross with you the Jordan, but then I want to go back home because I'm old. And old people want to be at home. They don't want to be at a hotel. They want to be, we know that, right? We know that. Yeah, exactly. So it seems that he was not only Giladi, he was also Polani, right? That's okay, but that's just again another truth of life. And Barzilai says, "Let me sit at my own city and pass away there and be buried with my father and mother." And that's the life, and that's the way I'm looking. That's the life and death I'm looking for myself. I have no aspirations to go to the big city, to go to Yerushalayim. Now, that in itself is very nice, I think, and again, very touching. And it's again speaking about the problems of old age. But Chazal took these psukim and gave them a very different angle, a very interesting one. And if Chazal wouldn't say that, we would never dared to say such things. But let's see what Chazal are teaching us. That's from the Gemara in Shabbat. So Rav said, Barzilai HaGiladi shikra have. He was a liar. Barzilai was a liar. That he cannot taste this, and he was blaming his old age. That is a lie. There was a certain maid woman at the house of Rebbe, and she was 92, not 80. She was 92. And she was the one to taste the food So she had such a delicate notion of food, taste, taste sense, that she was the taster. And she would say, you need a little more salt, a little more. So that's, so how can you say that because you are 80, you cannot taste? So you are a liar. Okay. And then it continues. Rava Amar, Barzilai HaGilady, Shatuf Vezima Havi. You know why? So you are right. It's not only because of old age. It's because the way Barzilai lived his life before the age of 80. Now, I would say something and we'd immediately qualify it. So don't get panicked because what we are going now to say. But Rava says, because Barzilai Shatuf Bezima, so he was running after pleasures all his life. And because of that, old age affected him much more than other people. Kol hashatuf bezima zikna kofetzet alav. So the old age is like jumping on him. And then the Gemara continues, Tanya Rabbi Ishmael Rabbi Yossi Omer, Talmidei Chachamim, so the sages, people of wisdom, when they get old, there is more wisdom that is being added to them. And he quotes a pasuk, by Shishim, that's a pasuk from Eov. By Shishim Chochma, so old people have wisdom, ve'orech yamim tevuna. And as your days are longer, you add in your understanding. But Amei Haaretz, but people that are not wise, people that are, as we say, they only run after pleasures. Kol zman shemazkinim, when they get old, tipshut nitvasefet, they add in stupidity. Shneemar mesir safa lena'emanim v'tam zkinim mikach, and they lose their taste. Ta'am zkinim mikach. So that's how he ties it to Barzilai HaGilady. Now, I want immediately, as I said, to qualify it. No one ever thought that people that are Talmidei Chachamim, that are Rabbanim, cannot unfortunately suffer at old age from all known symptoms of old age. We would have wanted to say, and would have wanted maybe to believe that that is something that cannot happen to people that learn Torah, and I would now give you the medication, so the prescription, if you want to avoid all the cholera of old age, just learn Torah. Unfortunately, I guess that every one of us know personally of people that were people of faith and people of Torah and people of mitzvot, and unfortunately, as I said, Kadosh Baruch Hu gives everyone according to his will and according to his wisdom, and we obviously do not understand always the way that things are being divided. We only know that El Emunah Hashem, we have faith in God, and we know that all of his acts are in justice. So what is this Gemara is trying to say? I think that what I said now is clear. That is that no one ever claimed, no one in his right mind, or no one that knows the word ever claimed that people of Torah cannot be affected by old age. The Gemara itself tells us about a certain, one of the greatest Amoraim, Rav Yosef. Now, Rav Yosef was a man of great Torah. We speak about his great power of memory and a great anava. He was a humble man. So when they wanted him, when he was young, they asked him to stand in the head of the yeshiva. He refused because of his humbleness. And he put one of his friends, Rabba, as the head of the yeshiva for 22 years. After 22 years, eventually after Rabba passed away, then Rav Yosef accepted the job. But then he was already, again, in their terms, he was old, and he was already, these words obviously would not appear in the Gemara, but it seems that he had some type of dementia, and he was forgetting. Now, that is especially tragic when you speak about Rav Yosef, because as I said, he was known for his a great memory. That was his great point of excellence. So when such a person is losing his memory, so that's even I don't know if you can say worse or not. I don't know how to count these things, but it's very, very tragic. he would sit in the yeshiva and his student would sit next to him and would remind him what he himself taught the student 10 or 20 years ago, which is a sad thing to see. And that only lasted for 2.5 years and then he passed away. So he, in fact, when he gave up being the head of the yeshiva, he gave up for life. So he was a very humble man. And nonetheless, what happened, happened. So as I said, I don't think that the Gemara ever taught that people of Torah cannot be affected by old age. So what the Gemara is trying to teach us. And in order to see that, I would like now to compare and contrast. So I would like to compare the view of our sages with Lehavdil Elef Alfei Avdalot with a book named Rhetoric by Aristotle, as we say here. Now, why would Aristotle relate to elderly people in Rhetoric? That is because he speaks there about the question, you want to speak to a certain audience. Know your audience before you prepare the speech, because you want to pitch, right, in accordance with their views. So he gives there a description of different audiences that you speak before, so you know how to fine-tune yourself. Okay, fine. So that's Rhetoric. So he had a whole chapter there about elderly people. I only gave you a taste of it. It's all, everything is on the internet, you can look up. The character of elderly men. They have lived many years. They have often been taken in and often made mistakes, and life on the whole is a bad business. The result, now he's not making fun, he's not being funny. Aristotle is not a man of being funny, he's dead serious. That's just a description of old people. Right? So the result is that they are sure about nothing and underdo everything. They think, but they never know. Why? Because they are hesitant. Why? Because they have life experience that things they used to know were mistakes. And because of their hesitation, they would always add a possibly or a perhaps, put in everything this way and nothing positively, which Aristotle view, obviously, in a very negative way. So what we would maybe see as wisdom, he sees as a weakness. They are cynical. That is, they tend to put the worst construction on everything. Again, that's the experience of life. Further, their experience makes them distrustful and therefore suspicious of evil. Consequently, they neither love warmly nor hate bitterly, but following the hint of bias, they love as though they will someday hate and hate as though they will someday love. They are small-minded because they have been humbled by life. Their desires are set upon nothing more exhalated or unusual than what will help them to keep alive. They are not generous because money is one of the things they must have. And at the same time, their experiences told them how hard it is to get and how easy it is to lose. They are cowardly and they are always anticipating danger. And he continues and goes on and on and on and on. So he is, I guess, the founder of ageism. But a part of that, I think that's a beautiful example. And again, he's not trying to be funny. That's an exemplar of what we just read about Ameya Aretz. So people that are interested only in physical things. So people that are not interested in spirituality, but in the material world. So as you grow old, then Aristotle is right. You discover that the material world is very lacking in its ability to pay back what you invest in it. And then you become coward maybe and small-minded. But Chachamim are trying to teach us that life, if you see life as disease, with, in the end, it kills everyone, right? That's a lethal disease. Then as life goes on, your prognosis is becoming worse and worse, which is basically what Aristotle is saying here, right? The experience of life, as he said, on the whole is a bad business. So you begin young and full of spirit, and expecting, and you end distrustful and maybe מאוכזב. Disappointed, thank you. Disappointed of life. And for Aristotle, that's more or less what would happen to most of the people. Because how many people can really have the luxuries and to enjoy them? It's not enough to have the ability to have luxuries, you need to have the ability of enjoying them. So if that is your goal in life, you are almost set to fail, or 99% of people would fail. And they would be bitter. And then being old would be extremely bitter. Now, Aristotle would not necessarily say that we need to throw them to the ice. Because as I said, every rational man would understand that the way you treat your elders, that's the way you would be treated. So yes, there are bitter people, but we need to suffer them so we would be suffer one day. That's basically the view that he's espousing here. Now let's see the Ran in his Rashod. And he is relating to the Gemara we read earlier about the difference between the elders that learn Torah, the elders that are invested in spirituality, and the elders that were invested throughout their life in materialism. And he says, אין הכוונה בכאן לומר שזקני תורה כל זמן שיזקינו תתרבה חוכמתם. So the Gemara never meant really to say that people of old age, but that they were learning Torah their whole life, they would continue necessarily to add more wisdom. He says, אפשר שאין כן, sometimes that's not what's happening, as we said. כי מאשר השכל צריך כלים גשמיים, as human beings are made of both neshama and body, and the body is the the vehicle for which the neshama can walk. So if the vehicle is beginning to fall apart, then what can we do? Even if the neshama is a shiny, beautiful neshama, nonetheless, the vehicle is falling apart. So sometimes it won't be able to drive anymore, right? So he says, we shouldn't take it in the physical level. That's a wrong reading of this passage in the Talmud, in the Gemara. So what is the real message here? פירושה שזקני תורה אשר בבחרותם הניחו תאוות העולם ובחרו הדרך הטובה, כל זמן שמזקינים דעתם מתיישבת עליהם, כלומר שהם מתפייסים יותר ודעתם נוחה במה שהסכימו. It's so beautiful. He says, if you are engaged throughout your life in kindness, in good deeds, in spirituality, in Torah, then your life experience is going to validate your beliefs. Because the way the world works is that the things that really, in the end, the thing that feed the human being is his relationship with other people, is investment in intellect, in intellectual things that he's learning, and his everlasting memories are of the kind things that he did to others. So if these are the things you are invested in, I'm sorry, it fell, the connection failed. Steve, can you hear me now?
כן, אני שומע.
Okay.
חשבתי שזה אני.
No, it's... Okay. So, back. So what the Ran says is that if you are engaged in spirituality, in kindness, in relationships with people, then your life experience is going to validate your beliefs. But לזקני עם הארץ יקרה ההפך. But to the people that are in the other side, right, of the spectrum, then their life, and that's exactly what Aristotle is speaking about. So if you're after pleasures, if you're after fame, so all of these things, you would be respected to a certain degree, some part of your life, as long as you can give the, as you say, לספק את הסחורה, right? As long as you can give the goods. So if you can give the goods, you would be respected. But one day, and it would happen to everyone, or virtually to everyone, at least if they link to old age, they will be forgotten. So you were the best investor in Wall Street, but one day you won't be able to keep up, and that will be the end of the story. And so goes to any other profession. If in the end that's what defines you, then Aristotle is completely right. Your life experience will teach you to be bitter, to be disappointed, to withdraw from the world. That's what Chazal say about Barzilai HaGilady. David HaMelech offered him to come to Yerushalayim. Now, Barzilai could have said, you know, Yerushalayim, that's the place of not the Beit HaMikdash was not yet built, but that's the place of spirituality. There are the Kohanim there are rabbis there. I can live near David HaMelech. He's writing Sefer Tehillim. He could have looked at all of these beautiful things that could be done in Yerushalayim. But he was, all of his life, he was after food, after songs, after concerts. Not that all of these things are beautiful things. But if that is the sum, the total grand sum of your life, then in the age of 80, that's what he said, what am I being left with? So I would stay at home and wait to my death. That's basically what he says. My life are not worth living anymore. And that is basically the two ways in which Yahadut approach the question of old age. So one approach is the approach, and here in source state, I gave the psukim. Al tifnu el haovot ve'el haidun. Do not go to the witches, right, or to people that are, I know, mediums. They change their name every generation, but basically nowadays they may be called Kabbalists sometimes, some of them. I'm not speaking about all of them, but some of them. So people that are, the Torah is warning us against trying to manipulate the world through magical powers. No magicians, no wizards, no witches. All of these are completely forbidden because these are impurity. And then the Torah continues, "Mipnei seiva takum ve'adarta penei zaken." We should, instead, rather, you should respect your elders. Now, what is the connection? The connection is obvious. Who are we to look up to for guidance? The Torah says, do not look up for guidance to this bunch of people that are trying to sell you their abilities to manipulate reality. You should look to your elders. Sh'al avicha ve'agedcha zkenecha v'yomru lacha. You should ask your father, you should ask the older generation. So that's one way of respecting the elders. These are the elders that were, as I said, engaged in kindness, in relationship building, in spirituality throughout their life. So their life experience is of validation. And what continues, so if there is someone who is a stranger, you should not take advantage of him. Now, what is the connection to that? The elder can be seen through both lenses, right? He can be the spiritual leader, the one that gives guidance. It can also be the weak in society that we need to take care of. These are not contradicting views. These are two different views. Sometimes they can just live together at the same person. He can be both a guide and a leader, but also a vulnerable and weak in the physical sense. But the question is, who was he throughout his life? And how do you relate? How do we relate to the elderly, the older generation? And that, I think, is what Avraham Avinu, when the Gemara says that Avraham Avinu had institutionalized zikna, right? He was the one to create this concept of being old. Now, it does not mean that before, I don't think that it means that before him people were young forever. What it means is that before him, people did not understand that life experience can validate. That life, instead of making you bitter, instead of making you just weak, instead of making you small-minded, it can make you great. That was the teaching that Avraham, who is our father, had taught the world. So obviously we should be the first to learn from this lesson. And when we look, and as I said, we didn't go into the resolution of should we invest more into this type of treatments for younger people or for older people. But what we should understand is that older people are not only in the category of vulnerable and people that are in need for our help, but they are also people that should be looked up to as people that should give us guidance. Our approach to them should not only one of being, we should be grateful to them or we should help them because we want to be helped, but our commitment towards them should also be based and founded on the simple fact that they are the ones that lead and show the way, as they have the experience, they have the knowledge, they have the wisdom of the generations. Now there is more, even for my sources here, I was not able to cover everything, but we need to wrap up. So we would end by that, and as always, there is more to speak about. There's always more to learn. And again, thank you for everyone that came, and thank you for those in the Zoom. And Be'ezrat Hashem, I hope that as the weeks go by, we would be able to gather more and more in the shul. Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.